Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture. Albion Never Dies. On the release of this podcast episode, I will have spent 365 days in the UK. That might not sound so unusual, especially given my accent, but in fact it's the first time since I left for China. Back in, I think, 2015. I feel I should know these things. Yes, it was 2015. And before that, of course, I had lived in the UK. I was studying and working, but actually, because I have family abroad, I actually spent a fair few months outside the UK in most calendar years. In fact, I spent my teenage years in the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. So I was trying to think over the last few months, when was the last time I spent 365 days in the UK? And actually, I can't think of a time as an adult that I've done that. And of course, that's what drives this podcast. I ask, what is Britishness? And it's not formed out of any bash patriotism. It's more because as I've happily lived my own life, travelling around the world and working around the world, it's a question that's been put to me. Like, what is Britain? Why do British people do X, Y, or Z? And I've had to become a bit of an expert, as I believe my friend Kane phrased it, that you're, as an expat, both an insider for the culture, because you are, of course, from there, but you're also a bit of an outsider, because, you know, the more time you spend outside, of course, the more you connect with other cultures. So, for example, I'm fluent in Turkish. I can happily natter away and get a fair few cultural references, but, you know, the more accomplished I become with Turkishness, well, the less time there is in the day for English stuff. So, for example, I was with my brother fairly recently. We were talking about British TV celebrities. I'm still not up to speed. Still no idea who, well, I'd say most of the people are. So, you know, I'm not always up to speed on British culture. So I tend to be a bit of a bridge between the UK and something else. And as I say, that's just grown organically out of me just doing my job. When I started this podcast, I was living in China. And throughout these pandemic years, I've moved from mainland China, did my quarantine in Hong Kong as I left, spent a little bit of time in the USA, and then come here. So I've been travelling about. So before I dive into what my 365 days have been like, I thought first I would put the clock back and I think, what was it like to be as a Brit in China? Well, if I only had some kind of recording where I talked about my day-to-day, preferably something interesting, say I was hiking up a mountain in the jungle. If only I had such a recording. Hello there. Do you think I sound a little bit out of breath? You are dead wrong. I am very, very out of breath. I'm just hiking. And hiking before work, I got up relatively early so I could clamber up this tropical hill. Because I thought for today's episode, after I'd do a podcast just on a day in the life of a very, very interesting person. Me. After all, I've been in China for about 6 years now. Before that, I lived in Turkey for 7 years. I have worked in Saudi Arabia and Oman and out on the North Sea for a bit. But most of what I'm talking about in this podcast is about, well, it's about the difference between British culture and other cultures. And this forms a very large part of my work. You see, I'm a director of studies. I manage a language centre, kind of a cultural centre, with about 1,500 students. They're all adults. My students are typically people who went to university, got a good job, or on some kind of route for promotion, but find they're missing a skill, and that skill is normally English. There'll be Chinese businessmen who need to advance in their company, maybe in the field of logistics. The city I live in, Shenzhen, has one of the deepest ports in China, so you get this huge shipping going out from there. Just look around your house. I guarantee you'll have something made in China. It's probably made from not too far away from here.
Manufacturing is a bit further inland from where I am. Actually, I'm on top of a hill, so right now I'm looking over at the gigantic bridge that links my city, Shenzhen, with Hong Kong, the new territories. So yeah, we've got a huge amount of shipping that starts from here, goes out all over the world, and for people to work in that kind of industry, well, they need English. They need English to talk to their clients. They need English to talk to their managers and supervisors. It's an important life skill. So yeah, I'm an English language teacher, but these days I don't do a huge amount of teaching in the classroom. If I do, to be honest, it feels like a treat. I'm managing a team of teachers. We've got service personnel. Now I've got someone to help me with the schedule, which is wonderful, because previously all these thousands and thousands of hours teaching every week, I've had to manage each specific one. So I'm getting a bit of help, a bit of automation. Yeah. So I just thought I'd do a bit of a day in the life of, because it's probably my day-to-day encounters that have shaped my view of British culture, at least in comparison to Chinese culture. I think a lot of culture can be understood through those little cultural interactions. Of course, there's great big things. Yeah. China used to have an emperor, and Britain, used to have an emperor. Of course, there are great big things. The Chinese drink tea, and we drink tea. Maybe we are alike. But there are small things day to day that make a big difference. And as I say, it's that day to day that have really shaped my view of culture. So I thought I'd do this one-off episode to talk about a day in the life of me. If that sounds interesting, carry on. If that doesn't sound interesting, carry on. I'll prove you wrong. And I guess the first thing for me to do is to get off this great big hill. Shower, that would be nice. Put on some clothes, and then head off to work. I'll be heading off to work on the Shenzhen Metro. When I first arrived, there were only 5 lines, and they added two more. I'm not quite sure how many there are. And recently, like in the last 2 years, because the last year's passed very, very quickly, they opened up a high-speed train going right down to Hong Kong, which is fantastic. It just took me about half an hour to take a train from my district in Shenzhen to Kowloon. Fantastic.
Well, there we go. Cut a little short there, I believe. But there we have a bit of an insight into what my day-to-day life was like in China. Like many expats, I went out there initially as an English teacher. Mine being a slightly unusual background, I'd been teaching English at the University of Bradford, then lecturing on a range of different topics, doing, kind of cover work. An academic would go, say, on holiday, need someone to cover. I happened to be around. They hired me for maybe 2 weeks and another 2 weeks, then maybe a semester, bit here, bit there. I was very young. I lectured at the university in my 20s, and something of which I'm very, very proud of. And ultimately, I kind of got recruited to go out and teach in China. And it's a wide open industry. It's really interesting. You could have anything from backpacker at Happy Giraffe English to people like myself. And I was representing my company to the head of the Chinese Communist Party for Guangdong. So Guangdong is a province which has 130 million people, and he had previously been the head of the Chinese space program. So whether it was glad handing that gentleman, or whether it was being responsible for a 2 million RMB turnover for a centre, my experience ended up being quite different from that of a teacher. And I said it there, if I ended up teaching a class, it was the best part of my day. For a whole 55 minutes, however long the classes were, the door was shut, nobody could bother me. I could just teach as an academic, and I really, really liked that. And I taught English, I taught Turkish, I taught business studies, I taught a range of kind of cultural studies. In fact, some of those cultural studies have fed into this podcast, at least the idea of doing it. So that was my day-to-day in China, and for me, it became just normal. So people have asked me over the last 365 days, what was it like living in China? And the answer is, it was normal. It was my normal. I am gradually finding the UK more and more strange. Those sounds you can hear in the background are me taking a Didi, the Chinese Uber, to work.
Thank you.
So there we have another little clip from my time in China, and that was me on my way to my education centre that I ran, and I was absolutely passionate about running it, and it's wonderful to be in a business that you can genuinely believe in. I do believe in education. There are many, many aspects to my job, and one of them is that I ended up setting up the social media accounts, blog and the equivalent of Instagrams and so on for China, all shared through Weixin or WeChat, which is the #1 social media app in China, and it really encompasses everything that all our different apps do in the UK and US, say WhatsApp and with Telegram, I think is another one, and YouTube, and all these things rarely do go through WeChat. Although you do have some other apps as well, actually, especially for video, Youku, Bilibili. But anyway, WeChat is really the central app, and I've been using it to help share blogs. Had a bit of a following, and towards the end of my time in China, I knew it was coming. I'd really decided it was time to call time. I'd seen it with other people once their time had come to an end. Some stayed too long, some maybe left too early. Everyone seems to have their time they need in another country, in another culture. And for me, I could feel my time was coming to an end. Plus, I wanted to get married and start a new life, move back to somewhere I could call home. And so I started to share some articles, and I referred to them when I dropped my announcement video that I was leaving, and well, I recorded it in a beautiful park, so I hope you enjoy the audio from that video.
Hello there, my name is Thomas, and if you've been following my account over the last few weeks, you'll see that I've been sharing about my first year in China, second year in China, third, fourth, fifth. This is now my 6th year in China with EF, Education First. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I've come across so many great students. I've had the pleasure of working with many, many great members of staff. Today I must tell you that my 6th year in China will be my last. My last year working for EF in China. As you may know, EF is a truly global company, and I will be traveling to the United States at the end of this month in order to work for EF in California. Some of you will remember that I've been to California a few times before. It is my girlfriend's home state. So we're looking to travel to the USA at the end of this month after 6 years in China. It's been a fantastic, fantastic experience, and I'd like to thank you for being part of it. There will of course be a big party, and that party will be this Saturday. This Saturday, it will be a James Bond theme party at 4:40. Everyone is welcome to come and join. Again, I've had a truly fantastic experience here in China. I'd like to thank you all for being part of it. Maybe I'll see you again, either in the United States or here, somehow, with EF.
Well, yes, that was the plan. That part about me going to California, my then girlfriend, now wife's home state. Getting married was, of course, the priority, and I put in my resignation, and the company asked me, hold it just a moment. And they started to put me through talking to more and more senior people. I had a good record. I've won numerous prizes, whether it was the top NPS in China, Net Promoter Score. Our customers were the happiest out of 60 equivalent centres. Or whether it was the highest rated teaching staff, as I was exceptionally qualified as a teacher, and I focused on training up my team to the highest possible standards. And with management training, I was very lucky. I had a master's in management and was able to apply it there very well to help develop other leaders. So I managed a team of leaders who then managed the teachers, as well as trained directly as much as I could. But I had a really good track record, and they just took me up more and more senior at the company. And then I was talking to directors who were based internationally, say in Switzerland. And I wasn't wholly sure, so at several points, what exactly was going on. And of course, this is the post-pandemic time. EF, Education First, had education centres all around the world, including in the US, so people would fly, say, from China to the west coast of America to do education courses there. And during the pandemic time, they closed all the ones down on the west coast. The initial idea was that I would be the one to manage kind of reopening all of that. I had the China experience, I knew where the customers were coming from, I had the Western education. The company was totally happy with that, and I was happy with that too. Sadly, the visa situation for the United States would not work out and still hasn't worked out. But that was the plan then. I'd have to change it, of course, and I'll get to that. But of course, I had the James Bond party, and then the team that I most directly manage presented me with a wonderful and very special little gift. I'll let you listen to that clip.
Time together as well as our teaching team, and we were thinking of different things that you enjoy. If you don't know this about Thomas, he spends quite a lot of time, one, researching tailored suits, but also buying tailored suits, and so like James Bond as well, he's always dressed very nicely, as you can see. So we wanted to add it to that as well too. So yeah, Rachel.
Open it.
Yeah, open it.
It's like a baby. Oh my goodness. It's a DWG. Wow. I didn't know you could do that. Wow.
That means happy marriage.
Yes, the other one.
Happy wedding now.
So much.
So that was my team presenting me with a pair of custom-made silver cufflinks, one of which says DWG, which stands for Dewang, which is the name of the centre that I managed, and the other is in Chinese characters and says Happy Marriage, as that's the reason that I was leaving, and would of course arrive in California. And I keep in touch. I sent them this video.
Hello from California, the Sunshine State. I'm here in my girlfriend's hometown of San Diego, where I'll be for the foreseeable future. I've had a very smooth journey from Hong Kong to Istanbul and then to LA, finally coming down to San Diego about a week ago, slowly getting over jet lag. I've just been here relaxing, taking it easy, and slowly getting to know the beautiful, beautiful city that is San Diego. It's a beautiful city with lots to do. I'm looking forward to sharing all about it with you. Best wishes. I've been very, very careful, taking precautions, staying safe. All of you, best wishes, and stay safe wherever you are.
Well, that was my video to my Chinese friends. And the key phrase there is, of course, for the foreseeable future. How long is that? Well, a minute if you're lucky. Of course, I had a job lined up. I was backed by a good company. I got married. My wife is American. I'm pretty well qualified. Good track record. But that visa was not forthcoming. And I waited, and I busied myself with my podcast and so on. But ultimately, I had to make a move. Man must work. And I was very lucky. A friend of mine was working in academic publishing and recommended me a really good company she knew. So I got in touch with them and I was curious, what is this job that you're putting me forward for? And they described it in a very vague, terms, actually. But it was a good chat. I ended up flying back to the UK 366 days ago. Took me a while to arrive here. This prospect of a brand new job in a brand new industry, but in a part of the country that I knew and had good friends. Really was starting, as in work-wise, all over again, although with far more skills and experience than I started with. But it has been a very interesting experience, and quite an unexpected one. I didn't think when I left China that this would be my future. So, I've explained what my job was in China, and talked a little bit about my time in the USA. I haven't really said what I do here. Well, I was hanging around in America waiting for everything to process, and a friend suggested, if you're looking for something, why not work for this company I know? It's an academic publishers. I've got the academic background. I'm interested in books and publishing and so on. And so I put forward for it. They even asked me all about this podcast in my interview. That was pretty interesting. I've ended up being one of the co-hosts on the Emerald Series podcast. So occasionally they've got a topic that I like, female terrorism or Brexit, or what was it, Roe versus Wade in the US. I did one on that. I've been on that. It's been alright. I've done it for almost a year now. And again, I'm just walking along by the canal, which is normally a lovely, lovely walk. At the moment, a bit blustery. Don't know how bad it is with the recorder. Maybe I'll do the rest of it when I get home. Okay, I'm now out of the blustery outside. It's actually not too cold. It was quite nice. I came back. I made myself a good lunch, bacon sandwiches. And that's one of the advantages of the company I work for. It's very, very flexible. They allow me to, work from home, work from the office as I like, as with everyone. And I think it's got a good work-life balance. Maybe too good sometimes, but I am enjoying it compared to, say, how life is in East Asia. And now just boiling the kettle to have a nice cup of tea to help wash down that bacon sandwich. I enjoy my walks along the canal, whether it's snowing, whether it's raining, whether it's sunshine, whatever it may be. I do enjoy it. It's quite different from life in China. I'd go for my morning run up a mountain if I could. It might take me an hour and a half, and it's hot and it's tropical, sometimes polluted. But after that, I'm very much in the city. It's a city of 14 million people that I was living in. Previously in my life, growing up, I might view London as, insanely big metropolis, but there you go, that's how my perspective has changed. I go to London, and compared to Shenzhen, compared to parts of Hong Kong, I'm just seeing London as, frankly, a lot smaller. And of course it's much older. I see how, London has combined the ancient and the modern in a way that most Chinese cities simply haven't. The Cultural Revolution has rarely had an effect there. And in southern China, a lot of the traditional culture that you might kind of hope to see was swept away in the 60s. Not true, of course, of Taipei. I spent a Chinese New Year in Taipei and was very, very impressed at how they combined the ancient and the modern. But perhaps that is part of the fact that they've been exposed more to Western influence, and it's the same in Hong Kong. You can see their ancient temples, they were not destroyed. It was then under British rule when the Cultural Revolution was going on in China. So again, I'm seeing the UK in a slightly different light. And of course, in California, you go everywhere by driving. Many people tell me they listen to my podcast as they drive because it's simply something you need to do. It's so spread out. Cities are not designed for walking. I'm told some American cities are very different, such as Boston. So perhaps if I spent time there, I'd have a very different perspective on the UK and the US. I'm going very much off the West Coast, which is what I saw. And at this moment, slightly distracted as I can see the kettle is coming to the boil, and I want to have my optimum cup of tea. Of course, that's a big difference between the US and the UK. Not many kettles there. Yes, I've seen people heat up water in a microwave to make tea. And And of course in the UK, one of my problems is that the water coolers don't have a boiling tap. There's cold and colder, but in China you always have a boiling tap as well. Excuse me, let's just pour my tea. Good varieties of tea around here. So as I say, I've been working in the UK for this publishing company. It's an academic publishers. The job interview seemed a little bit vague as to what the job is, and now, having done it for almost a year, I'm not sure if I could be any less vague, because I am one of the... I'm kind of in the middle of about 20 different departments, and as they all knock against each other, my job is to resolve whatever is going on and to try and find out what is going on. And that includes the authors. I'm talking to Nobel Prize winning authors and trying to get them to work out the realities of publishing as opposed to the realities of whatever their research may be. They're not an expert necessarily on publishing, and it tends to be that academics as a whole would like to believe that everything is fair use unless they created it, in which case someone else should be paying them money. But of course, I get that with my podcast and YouTube sometimes, as people say, just use this, it's fair use. But of course, copyright is very different in the UK and the US, let alone Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and a wide variety of other countries that my company publish in, and we have to be aware of all of them. So it is an interesting job. It can involve legal things, it can involve production things, it can involve academic things. I've often had to redraw graphs and so on because what I'm being given is unpresentable for an actual book. Very interesting for an academic presentation and so on, but not so good for an actual print book. Unfortunately, I have a background that I can do these things. I understand the academic side, and with management I can understand what's going on in all these different teams pretty well. It's a problem-solving job, and if that sounds vague, well, it's a bit of a roving brief, and it has given me a really good insight into publishing. Anyway, that's been my last couple of years. I realise I focused heavily on my time in China, but that has really shaped my view on how to talk about British culture. In the speech, good fella Austin gave me those cufflinks. He talked to the audience about James Bond and my love for it. I often found it a really good kind of Trojan horse for teaching about British culture because you can show a video, show a picture, it's always going to look great, it's always going to raise interest. Of course, in China, the James Bond films were not released there in the 60s or in the 70s or in the 80s. I think one of the Pierce Brosnan films got released there. But it's very much a modern phenomenon, and whilst, say, in the US, James Bond is very much a thing for perhaps Anglophiles, beyond those who are just like action films and spy films. In China, it's not differentiated. So if you search Ling Ling Chi 007 on Baidu, which is their equivalent of Google, works better in the Chinese language. If you search for 007 on the Chinese Google, then you get Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, because it's just kind of a generic thing for all spy films. There's a lot less differentiation. It's all Western stuff. I mean, I had a Chinese person say, but isn't James Bond just Batman? Aren't they just kind of the same thing? Again, a good interesting insight into Western films, because of course the Christopher Nolan Batman films, Christopher Nolan is a British director who loves Bond films and has been crowbarring in Bond references to his trilogy. I'd love to see his take on the Bond films proper. But anyway, these are the influences that have been shaping my view of Britishness. And when I came back, I did a series on being back in Britain, recording, for example, my problems with the trains. Of course, I'd shoot around China quite happily on the newly created metros and city-to-city trains. And again, I described earlier how the Chinese metro in Shenzhen, they'd opened up line after line after line, whilst in the UK, they've really been stripping away investment, and that came out really with the strikes over the summer that affected myself and millions of others quite badly, and that led on to bus strikes and so on and so on. So I think if I'd been living in the UK and I'd been seeing these slow changes over time, I might not be so aware of them as if I'd been exposed to something else and come back. And of course, travelling about in San Diego, well, public infrastructure is certainly not like China, isn't really like the UK. It's all comparative. So So, I suppose the conclusion to this podcast is where you stand depends on where you sit. These have been the influences on me as I look at the UK. I'm not sure if I have any solid conclusions because the research is still ongoing. I'm still living here, still trying to work out how the UK actually functions, how it's changed. How do you see it, and how do you see it changing? I say this has been the best part of my podcast, people talking to me and asking questions. So now you know the story, how I got here. I hope you found it interesting. 365 days in the UK, but an adult lifetime leading up to it.